If I were trying to accumulate power, I would try to accumulate a lot of information about people and control education and things of this nature. And I hate to sound conspiratorial, but you know, we're talking global warming is woven into this, which is very international. Is there something beyond our government, beyond some ideology at our government level that is masterminding this? Or okay, I'd like to hear some. I don't know if you have evidence or what, but I'd love to hear opinions or theories or facts if there are some.
So. I think that I can talk a little bit about what goes on at Stanford. So I have a colleague at Stanford named Linda Darling Hammond. And when you, I mean, when I noticed something, there was a vast change in competence on the part of the people in the education world. Let me distinguish. When I say education world, I do not mean the universities. The competence in the people in the education world dramatically increased between the time when we essentially wiped them out in California in the math wars and had 12 years of relative peace and real improvement in outcomes. And today, where 4 years ago, we were completely outmaneuvered by the people in the education world, just completely outmaneuvered. And all of a sudden, they put together the system, and Jane gave a very solid and, unfortunately, I believe, totally correct picture of what the world is now and what our expectations are now if we can't change things. So I kind of looked very hard. And I know most of the players, and I kept looking back at Linda Darling Hammond. And my conjecture here is that if you look at one person who was capable of changing the level of the education world that much that they could actually get at us, then there's that's the one person. And there is such a person now. There wasn't back in the late 90s.
I'm delighted to be here. Leslie has been asking me about coming to Paris to do this talk for a couple of years, so it's always wonderful to come to Paris, and it is especially wonderful to have a chance to meet those of you working in this field. The talk is titled, like the book that Leslie just mentioned, The Flat World in Education, after Tom Friedman's book, The World is Flat, which talked about globalization and how that's influencing all of us. And so I asked the question, what is the influence or the implication of this flat world for education, after I had a conversation with Tom, and he said, I know it's about education, but I'm not exactly sure, you know, what it means. I wrote this actually while I was heading Barack Obama's transition team, policy transition team, back in 2008, and I wrote it for him, and I gave him the only hard copy my publisher gave me, he got, and he promised to read it, and I said I would give him a test, and it would not be multiple choice. So we're still working on his performance assessment. But I want to take up these issues that I took up in the book about the issues of inequality, about the nature of reform, and there's already been allusion to the fact that there are all kinds of reforms that are being propounded by governments around the world, not only the United States. Everyone is engaged in reform because education is becoming more important for individuals and society, and because there are a lot of competing ideas about how to improve the quality and the equity of education systems. I want to start with America's own history around inequality, which is deeply rooted in a period of enslavement of African Americans, of denial of educational opportunities to not only enslaved African Americans and others, but Mexican Americans, Native Americans, and so on.
We got kind of go through a timeline of how this course was developed. All of the AP courses are in the process of redevelopment. This is not the first of the AP courses. We have had a few others in the past couple of years. A teacher preparing for this course would not look at any one of those sections independently. They would be looking at that unit of study, incorporating skills, getting those overarching themes, because history can be kind of fuzzy in different places. You can't just say it started on this day and ended on that day in many of the circumstances, and you can't just say that one great leader woke up one day and became famous and great. There's a lot of decisions and processes that have to go on. And then years later, people want to interpret. One of my favorite social studies guidance mentors told me one day, you got to remember, this is not the story of dead white men as taught by almost dead white men. There were other people there too. And you got to give room for that flexibility. You got to give room for that flavor.
Jane Robbins is Senior Fellow with the American Principles Project, and she's going to share some thoughts with us as well.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. I think it's appropriate that we're meeting across the street from a Gates-funded organization that is pushing Gates-funded education reform. And it's important to note that these types of strategies that are being discussed across the street are the same sort of thing as Dr. Milgram indicated that we've seen over and over again. It's Common Core, it's related progressive education strategies that are coming in even to Texas. Even though Texas supposedly doesn't have Common Core, it's definitely got the progressive education strategies that are there. And these they replicate and they in fact exacerbate everything that has damaged education over the last 50 years. But we're supposed to expect that this time it's going to be good, that if we just do more of what doesn't work, then this time it will make things better. And it's bleeding over into other areas of education as well, including the AP classes, for example. And there's something on the tables about AP US History, the new framework that they've come out with for AP US History, which will completely usurp state history standards, including Texas. There's almost no alignment between Texas history standards, but the people at the College Board, who are, of course, funded by Gates and funded by the federal government, are pushing these new revisionist history standards. So that's something that Texas parents need to be aware of as well, and maybe can talk to their state board, their Texas board, to push back against the Common Core. This is what we are trying to let people know, that you can push back against this. This is not a fait accompli. This is not something that we just have to just sit back and put up with. This is something that parents need to stand up and say enough. Legislators need to stand up and say enough. They need to stand up to the federal government, stand up to the people who have the big money. And that's what we're hoping to try to persuade people that they have the power to do. And I think that Texas may be the best place to start. Thanks.